even now I'm not entirely sure if the army knew what they were doing there.
And what were you able to understand why decisions were made in the Congo? Actually, looking back at it, you said that you had if you were in the cavalry, you had a particular purpose, so you would have known what your objective was or what you needed to do. But going back and researching it in a number of years later, was that apparent? Why certain decisions were made?
Decision making. I remember I was very low down the food chain. I was in the first two missions an acting corporal. I thought I'd arrived actually with the 34th Battalion. There's nothing teaches leadership as quick as being made an acting corporal, especially if you're billeting with guys you've been out boozing and who, excuse me, chasing girls, all that sort of thing. And suddenly you're an acting corporal, and the guys don't particularly know what the hell you are, because you haven't been away in a course and you haven't been taken out and brought back and been made special. I use the word special advisedly because when you move up the ranks, you're no longer part of the great mass. You become, however small, a type of leader, and you become special in a certain funny way. Okay, you're a corporal. In those days, you were living in the same billet. The only difference was your bed was the further side of the door, so the early sergeant could kick you out of bed in the morning to get everybody else up. I went to Cyprus as a sergeant, which is even better fun, because then you were high enough up to be nobody's growled at you too much, and particularly second lieutenants were inclined to ask you what to do next. But you understood a little bit more. But in those days, you generally did not know what was going on. You may have known that you had to move from, for example, we went this famous long patrol with armoured cars from Camina to Lisbonville. Doesn't sound much. It was 200 something kilometres, Ford armoured cars, Swedish Terragabel APCs. Why did we do it? We had sent the first 5 armoured cars from Camino to Lisbon by air, but it meant taking off the turrets and getting the Indian Air Force, not Globemasters, it was double tail boom things, old World War II air transporters. They had to be brought in bits. And then it was decided this is taking too long, we'll just move them by road. Oh dear. Ford armoured cars were never made for the Congo, they were never made for that sort of thing. I understood that decision. I didn't understand why we moved to Lisbonville, because we'd been in Camina, which was a marvellous place. It's not this world, it probably by Belgian army standard was quite high, but to us it was absolutely, we had proper billets, showers, proper messes, cinemas, sports tracks, theatres. It was just unbelievably well equipped. And then we were brought up to Lisbonville. For the last 3 months of our service, we lived in tents. I never knew why until I went to research why it was done. The reason was we were there to frighten the gendarmerie away from the airport. But I didn't know that. I just knew. I knew I had to put lighting into a camp from a generator.
Yeah.
I knew that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But why were we there? I didn't know.
Did you get an opportunity to speak to any members of the 32nd and 33rd battalions before, or even the limited time of the handover? Was there an opportunity? I mean, what did you know about the Congo before you travelled out?
I probably would be a little bit different. There was a few. At that time, soldiers were not terribly well educated. A lot of soldiers could not read and could not write. I didn't know this until many years later. The 32nd had come back. They had already come back before the 34th left, because there was a couple of weeks in between. Yeah. And they had all gone on leave. They came back, they handed in their kids, they given £10. Give a £10 note. Who could change £10 note in 1960? Anyway, beside them, and they disappeared. They were ordained, they were special, they were gone. 33rd Battalion, we met some elements of them in Camina. Conversation was mostly about why the Indians and Pakistanis did not keep the camp a lot thicker and better, and why they never washed out showers and toilets. That was generally. And food. Why do we have to eat Indian rations? If you can imagine arriving, I was 20, never been overseas, never been outside Ireland, never been in a plane. I arrived 4 a.m. in Leopoldville on the Congo River, and were brought to a transit camp with our beds with no mattresses, no blankets, and were given breakfast, which were chips, biscuits and Pepsi Cola. I'd never had a Pepsi Cola in my life before, much less a biscuit. And then some hours later, we were put back in different aircraft and flown to Caminaville, where we arrived, and the Indian Army gave us chapatis and curry. And there's a culture shock for you on its own. I didn't know the Indians were there. I didn't know the Pakistanis were there. I thought they were at each other's throats, which they were, but there they were not. So, like, the 33rd Battalion mostly were telling you things like, the water is fine to drink, don't mind the shit but putting tablets, sterilising tablets in your water bottles.
Did we develop it all between the 13, your last battalion then?
Oh yeah, 39th.
Yeah.
All the shit was gone. However, it was, I think, down to, first it was a smaller battalion. It was probably about 400 and something against 600. The cavalry element were more independent than ever in the 39th Battalion, and we had better equipment. We had the 4th Armoured Car, we never took off. We turned Gabon, and we had M114.5s tracked APCs. Geez, they were great things. They could swim and everything. They could cross rivers. Fine. I went on the long patrol to the Lolo, which itself was an exercise on, went from can't think of the base now. It's gone from the Colwezi to the Lolo by road, company strength. Went there. It took us a day and a half, one overnight on the road, and that in itself was the first time I think I ever remember us operating where I knew what we were doing and what was going to happen. But it was down to the fact. Did you ever know a fellow called Kevin Knightley?
I did, yeah. He was a close friend of my father actually, and he lived very near where I grew up actually.
Kevin was then a lieutenant, first lieutenant, and he was in charge of the cavalry there. It was him who fucking got me into. I didn't know it for until later. We had an interpreter with us from the Congolese army, so we were moving the Congolese army in. The rebellion was over, Katanga was finished, it was now part of the Congo. Kevin Knightley told everybody, every day, every morning, every evening, what was going on, what we did and we did not do. The first time we were ever properly briefed. Again, like, we didn't have to know. It didn't matter. All we knew was we had to drive the armoured vehicles from A to B. But he said, where we're going. And inadvertently, this interpreter, who was a captain of the Congolese army, asked one of the locals how many more miles to the Lolo, and he said it was, I forget what the number was, and it was translated back into English, not 8, it was 80 was the answer. It was translated back as 8. We're 8 kilometres or 80 kilometres, a hell of a difference. Now I said to somebody, that guy doesn't speak English very well, because the answer was 80, not 18, 80. And Knightley was behind me and I did not know, and he said, what? What do you mean? How do you know that? No, not aggressively, because he didn't do aggression unless you actually made a bollocks or something. Then he was very good at aggression, controlled aggression. And he toddled off to Commandant Quinlan was in charge, not that famous Quinlan, and told him this and this how I got back. But this briefing made sense. of what we're doing.